Present us, O Lord, in all our doings with thy most gracious favor, and further us with thy continued help, that in all our works begun, continued, and ended in thee, we may glorify thy holy name, and finally, by thy mercy, attain everlasting life. Amen. I've got a couple of announcements. I'd just like to welcome all our guests here today, and just like to caution you not to take part in the proceedings, and no clapping or talking, heckling, or taking photos. Also, for all of us, there's going to be a Sask alert at 1:55. So members and the gallery, please shut off your phones, even though the alert may go through anyway, even if it's shut off, I notice sometimes. If we have some noise, we can pause for a few seconds till it's over, or work through it. Introduction of guests. I recognize the member from Saskatoon Willow Grove.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's with great pleasure that I introduce to you and through you a good-looking group of 58 students, grade 8 students, from the Dr. Sylvia Fedoruk School in the Evergreen neighbourhood in Saskatoon. They have the pleasure of being from a beautiful new school in the Saskatoon Willow Grove constituency, of course named after a former Lieutenant Governor of the province. They are accompanied by their teachers Andrew Kitchen, Wayne Gehring, and Janelle Lavoie. Andrew is quite familiar with the parliamentary process. He brings his class here each and every year, and his father is a member of Parliament from Saskatchewan here as well, the Estevan Weyburn area. So, Mr. Speaker, again, to you and through you, to all members, please help me welcome this group of 58 students to their Saskatchewan legislature.
I would like to join with the member in welcoming Andrew Kitchen and his class. Andrew became the team leader of Saskatchewan's Teachers Institute on Parliamentary Democracy in 2022. He was a participant of SSTI in 2017 and selected to be a member of the steering committee on 2018. The steering committee works with my office, Social Studies Saskatchewan, and the Ministry of Education to host the SSTI each year. Thank you, Andrew, for your dedication to the SSTI program. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Kitchen and his grade 7 and 8 class to the Legislative Assembly. I recognize the member from Saskatoon University.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to welcome in your East Gallery 22 grade 8 students from a school in my riding of Saskatoon University, Ecole College Park. These students, these bright young minds, are joined today by their bright young teacher, Mr. Grayson Bowden. Grayson, many on this side know Grayson well, very politically engaged, very astute and engaged teacher who is, I'm sure, just a wonderful pleasure to have as a teacher for these students. I really look forward to meeting with students after question period to answer any questions they may have, and welcome, ask all members to welcome these students and their teacher Grayson to their legislature.
Recognize the Minister of Sask Bills and Procurement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are 16 public service employees seated in your gallery, the Speaker's gallery today, Mr. Speaker. They're here today to take part in the parliamentary program for public service. The program includes a tour of the Legislative Building, briefings presented by various branches of the Legislative Assembly and Executive Council, an opportunity to sit in the Speaker's gallery and observe question period, and briefings with members of both sides of the House and Mr. Speaker. Now, unfortunately today, because of Premier's estimates, some of that will be cut a bit short, but I will miss getting the chance to dialogue with you because I always look forward to that when these groups come in. The participants are here today from Agriculture, Education, Finance, Health, Government Relations, Justice and Attorney General, Public Safety Agency, Trade and Export Development, Public Service Commission, Water Security Agency, and the Legislative Assembly Services of Saskatchewan. So please join me in welcoming these people to their Legislative Assembly. And Mr. Speaker, while I'm still on my feet, I too would like to take the opportunity to welcome Andrew Kitchen to the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan, and I guess just clarify that he is originally from Estevan, not from Weyburn, and his father lives there also. So welcome. He is a great advocate for the education system that we have, and he takes part fully. And so welcome Andrew again to his Legislative Assembly.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I seek leave for an extended introduction.
Leave has been requested for an extended introduction. Is leave granted? Carried.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you, I'd like to welcome 4 guests who are seated in the Speaker's Gallery today from Ronald McDonald House Charities, Saskatchewan. We have Marceline Zimmer, the COO, Alicia Gaudette, Ashlyn Yablonsky, and Leah Turcott. Today is McHappy Day in the province, where a portion of the proceeds from every McDonald's item goes to Ronald McDonald House Charities in Saskatchewan. And this is to raise much-needed funds for their programs and families that they support across the province. They are an important partner in healthcare in our province, providing programs for families of sick children that positively impact the health and well-being of the whole family. I'm also happy to share that Ronald McDonald House Charities of Saskatchewan is actively pursuing expansion opportunities in Regina and Prince Albert to serve even more Saskatchewan families, and there will be more details to come about this in the coming months. To show your support, I ask all members to participate at their local McDonald's for McHappy Day. I indulged in some fries right before coming in here, and ask all members to join me in welcoming this group to their assembly today. And while I'm on my feet, Mr. Speaker, I would be remiss if I did not welcome Grayson Bowden and join in this welcoming this group from McColl College Park. I talk about Grayson a lot in this assembly. Many of you will know that Grayson is my partner. But he's rarely here to hear about it. So I'll briefly introduce him. Grayson has a number of merits. He has been a recipient of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal and Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. He has his Master's of Education and participated through the BAC program here in Regina, Mr. Speaker. He's a French immersion teacher. He's passionate about education, about fairness, about justice. And, I met Grayson quite a long time ago. He was accomplished through the cadet program in Army cadets, and at 17 years old, hiked up to base camp at Mount Everest, which I don't know many people who can do. He hates it when I talk about that, but it's an amazing accomplishment. In our lives, he, on the side, is our household mechanic, carpenter, will look anything up on YouTube and be the Mr. Fix-It at home. He enjoys smoking meats and doing all things that involve barbecuing and disc golf as well, Mr. Speaker. And I want to wish him welcome to this legislature and also wish him a happy birthday. And I think he created this birthday present for himself by joining here today. I ask all members to join me in welcoming my partner Grayson to the Assembly.
Recognize the Minister of Crown Investments Corporation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to join with the member opposite, among other things, to welcome Grayson to the Assembly today. I have some things broken at my house as well, and would certainly welcome him to come over, and the barbecue's not working either. So in any event, welcomed him, and I think the important thing is that we all want to recognize our families, spouses, and the people that enable us to do our work. So to the member opposite and to all of the families and spouses that give us support, thank you. But I rose specifically, Mr. Speaker, to welcome the people from Ronald McDonald House. This is an organization that operates in Saskatoon, but usually for the benefit of people across the province as people come in to deal with a sick child. They've been a wonderful organization, and they've been aggressive recruiters for people to come out, cook, clean, and give some assistance to the people that are staying there. My neighbor, Doug Osborne, has been active in the past and has recruited me to go there and fix things there that I didn't fix at home. So to the people that are there from Ronald McDonald, I just want to welcome them. They did earlier, a number of years ago, recruited MLAs to go and work at McDonald's here for media morning on the thing, and I got to work in a drive-through. And after I'd spent an hour and a half in the drive-through mixing up orders and everything else, question period seemed mild. So, Mr. Speaker, to those people, I would welcome them to their legislature and thank them very much for the great work that they've done.
Recognize the member from Regina Douglas Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to first join with the minister opposite in welcoming this group of public servants from the parliamentary program to their legislative assembly. Echoing, as the minister had said, thank you for all the work that you do every single day. It's such a pleasure to see you here today. We're very supportive of the program. As the minister mentioned, very sad that we don't get the opportunity like we normally do to have the dialogue with you after question period. Premier's estimates has gotten in the way of that today, but I do know that you will still have a wonderful and informative afternoon. And Mr. Speaker, while I'm on my feet, I don't get a lot of family coming to visit me anymore these days. Kind of old hat here at this point, it seems, but I do want to point out I do have my cousin visiting today. She's one of the individuals from Ronald McDonald House. Leah Turcott has joined us in the Assembly. Leah is a resident of Saskatoon, of course, very passionate about the work she does at Ronald McDonald House, also a passionate lover of travel and family. She's from the SAR side, so you know that comes hand in hand, a love of family and gatherings and travel. I had the pleasure and opportunity to live with her family for a few months at the beginning of my law school journey, which I think was like 15 years ago already. Feels like such a long time ago. It's been such a pleasure to watch her grow up into such an incredible person. It's such an honor to have her here today, and I'd ask all members to join me in welcoming her and everyone else to their legislative assembly.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Riversdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you and to all members, I would like to introduce in the Speaker's gallery, Michelle Miller. I've known Michelle we were trying to figure it out. I think it's around 10 years, Mr. Speaker, and we have a mutual best friend, and that is John Thompson from Regina here. And a lot of people around the province would certainly know John as Coca-Cola Santa Claus. He traveled around in the Coca-Cola truck throughout the last several years, and he does a bike collection in Regina at the Coca-Cola Center here. So Michelle and I have become good friends through that, and this is her first time in the House, even though she's been in Regina, I think, 35 years. And she's also a recent mother. So please, everyone, join me in welcoming Michelle Miller to her gallery today.
Recognize the member from Regina Rosemont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a few special people in my life to introduce in the Assembly here today. Seated in your gallery, Mr. Speaker, I want to introduce for, I believe, his first time here, Mr. Speaker. He came for a planned visit. This is my nephew, Carson Wenninger. Carson, give us a wave. He's grade 6, age 11, plays on 2 basketball teams right now, Team Fresh and Fresher, Mr. Speaker. He's an awesome guy. Water polo as well. Has played lacrosse, loves camping and biking. He's been my paddling partner and hiking partner and fished and boated together, Mr. Speaker. He likes golf as well, Mr. Speaker, and he saved up all of his money from birthdays and from Christmas and bought a great used set of clubs last year, and he's ready for the season, Mr. Speaker. He's a real special guy. He's thoughtful, he's caring, he's smart as heck, Mr. Speaker, and he's rock solid. And it's real nice to welcome him to his assembly. I'd also give a quick shout out, I've introduced them in the past, but to my dad, Craig, who's here today, and to my much better looking mom, Faye, who's here today, Mr. Speaker. And of course, Mother's Day is this weekend, Mr. Speaker. I would just give a shout out to all the moms and to my mom for the unwavering love and support and for being such a light in all of our lives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Moose Jaw Wakamo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I noticed just before the proceedings started that one of the people visiting here today is a constituent and a friend of mine and former CA for Warren, my colleague that used to be in Moose Jaw North. And her name's Judy Hatfield. She's hanging around the clock. There she is. And I wanted to just have everybody give Judy a special welcome to her legislature.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Briefly, I just want to rise today and welcome all of the guests who have gathered here today to watch the proceedings. It's lovely to hear people talk about their loved ones and their families in the way that we've heard this morning. Shout out to Andrew, who we've seen here before, of course. But I want to give a special welcome to some of the family members of this team that we have here today. And I know there are probably more that are listening at home. And I hope he's listening, because I'm going to agree with the Minister of Labour on this. The work that our families do, our parents, our partners, our extended family like we have here today, they allow us to do what we do here. And I know that's the case for both sides of the House. You have sent some extraordinary people here to this legislature, raised them in some cases, and we probably don't say thank you enough. We don't ask forgiveness enough for the time that we keep them away from you, but please know that it is appreciated, and it allows us to do the work that we need to do here on behalf of the people of this province. With that, Mr. Speaker, I would invite all members to join me in welcoming these guests to their Legislative Assembly.
Recognize the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to join with the Leader of the Opposition and many other members as well in just acknowledging that members in this Assembly today, those that have gone before us, those that have yet to arrive here, certainly don't serve in this Assembly alone. We only serve with the love and more importantly, the support of our family members. And so I too would like to acknowledge Grayson here today and the support that he provides. I'd also like to acknowledge both Craig and Faye in supporting a member on the floor of this Assembly through his career as a politician. I would say in some respects effective career as well. Certainly we don't agree on everything, but I would say that we actually agree on more than what people might realize. Here's a little bit of advice. It's free advice, so you take it for what it's worth to Carson. I heard you're interested in basketball, paddling with your uncle, and those types of things. Don't take advice from him on picking your hockey team that you're going to cheer for. It's been a very exciting year for the Boston Bruins, as we know, most certainly not as exciting postseason. But I would like to join with the Leader of the Opposition and all others in welcoming everyone that has joined us here today, but in particular welcoming and thanking those family members that support us in our work on the floor of this Assembly.
Presenting petitions, I recognize the member from Kindersley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to present a petition to the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan, whereas we, the undersigned residents of the province of Saskatchewan, wish to bring to your attention the following: that the NDP Liberal federal tax on carbon continues to make life more expensive for Saskatchewan residents, that the federal NDP Liberal coalition government continues to be disingenuous with their rhetoric surrounding the carbon tax, and that according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer's analysis, most households will pay more in fuel charges and GST, as well as receiving slightly lower incomes than they will receive in climate action incentive payments, despite promises from the federal government that the tax would remain revenue neutral and that families would benefit. The reality is that families are paying more than they receive. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan take the following action: to call upon the Government of Canada to immediately end the federal carbon tax and support Saskatchewan's development as a global supplier of food, fuel, and fertilizer. The below undersigned residents are from the town of Kindersley. I do so submit. Thank you.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to present a petition calling for recruitment and retention of pediatric specialists. These citizens wish to bring to our attention that Saskatchewan's sole practicing pediatric gastroenterologist has announced her intention to close her practice this year and leave the province. That parents of pediatric GI patients will have to leave the province to get medical care for their children. That Saskatchewan has an insufficient number of pediatric specialists in other fields, including neurologists, immunologists, adolescent medicine, and ENTs, and that Saskatchewan children requiring specialized care are not receiving the medical treatment they need. I'll read the prayer. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan call on the Government of Saskatchewan to immediately recruit an appropriate complement of pediatric GI specialists and adjunct services and develop a plan to address the service gaps in pediatric specialty fields. This is signed today by individuals from Saskatoon. Mr. Speaker, I do so present.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to stand, as I have every day since thousands gathered on these steps, to stand up for publicly funded and delivered education in our province. Those who signed this petition would like us to be aware that the education funding included in this year's budget is wholly inadequate and will lead to cuts in the classroom again. Today, I'd like to highlight the voices of teachers. Saskatchewan teachers who said after this budget that they were baffled by this government's disregard for students. The SCF president, Samantha Beacott, says, quote, this government either doesn't understand the issues or doesn't think they are important, end quote. Mr. Speaker, we have incredible teachers in this province, but it's not fair year after year that they're being asked to do more with less. I'll read the prayer. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan call on the Government of Saskatchewan to provide adequate, sustainable and predictable operating funds for our 27 public and separate school divisions to ensure that schools, teachers and other caring professionals are able to meet the needs of every student in Saskatchewan. This petition today is signed by residents of Regina, Moose Jaw and Warman. I do so present.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon-Meewasin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to present our petition calling on the Government of Saskatchewan to renew its 35-year relationship with Luther Heights in Saskatoon in providing affordable housing units to seniors in my riding of Saskatoon-Meewasin. Thus, the undersigned residents would like to bring to our attention the following. The Department of Social Services is cancelling the government subsidy for 50 apartments in Luther Heights, a seniors' residence in Saskatoon. The decision to eliminate these subsidies reduces the supply of affordable housing to seniors on fixed incomes and creates a burden and stress on us all, and it's forcing seniors to leave their homes. We urge the government to reconsider ending this relationship and renew the partnership with Luther Heights. I'll read the prayer. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan call on the Government of Saskatchewan to reverse the decision to eliminate subsidized housing and restore funding for the 50 units affected at Luther Heights. Mr. Speaker, the signatories today reside in Regina. I do so present.
Recognize a member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm on my feet to present a petition calling on this government to provide equitable and adequate SED rates. The SED program supports some of the most vulnerable across our province. It is a program of support for folks with significant and enduring disabilities with barriers to employment. Mr. Speaker, for nearly a decade, the SED program didn't see any kind of raise from this government. Folks were told, times are tough, we just can't do it. Now, this year, with $1 billion in windfall revenue, the folks on the SED program got a measly $1 a day. A 2% increase after the failure to increase SED rates represented an overall reduction in benefits of 20%. No wonder many folks on the program have described this as a slap in the face, Mr. Speaker. Further to this, this government is being taken to court by the Regina Anti-Poverty Ministry due to their discriminatory clawback policies under this program. What a shame, Mr. Speaker. With that, I'll read the prayer. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request the Legislative Assembly to increase SED rates, respect the constitutional rights of folks with disability in this province, index SED rates going forward, and provide targeted relief to those in deepest poverty, namely single individuals paying market rent. The signatories of this petition reside in Saskatoon and Waka. I do so present.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon University.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise to present our petition calling for pay equity legislation here in Saskatchewan. The undersigned residents would like to bring to our attention the following, that Saskatchewan is one of only 4 provinces that has not implemented pay equity legislation in Canada, that Saskatchewan has one of the highest gender wage gaps in all of Canada, which is the result of systemic gender discrimination in compensation for work that must be corrected with pay equity legislation. That over 25 years ago, the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission has recommended proactive and comprehensive pay equity legislation, which to date has not been pursued by the Government of Saskatchewan. That while the Saskatchewan Human Rights Code prohibits gender-based compensation discrimination, the complaint-driven process puts no positive obligation on employers. And finally, that while pay equity advocacy primarily seeks to address gender-based wage discrimination, it must also be very mindful of ability, age, identity, and race-based wage discrimination. I'll read the prayer. We in the prayer that reads as follows respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan call on the Government of Saskatchewan to introduce pay equity legislation. Mr. Speaker, the signatories today reside in Lintlaw and Kelvington. I do so present.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon-Utana.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to present a petition today to prohibit conversion therapy. The undersigned residents wish to bring to your attention the following. Conversion therapy used discredited and abusive practices which attempt to actively change sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. The Saskatchewan Human Rights Code names sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity as one of the prohibited grounds of discrimination. The practice of conversion therapy or reparative therapy is seriously harmful to individuals and is opposed by the Canadian Psychological Association, the World Health Organization, and the American Psychiatric Association. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child indicates that children should not be discriminated against based on sexual orientation or gender identity. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan call on the Government of Saskatchewan to ban the practice of conversion therapy and prohibit transporting youth and adults outside Saskatchewan for such purposes. This petition is signed by the residents of Saskatoon. I do so present.
Hear, hear.
Reading and receiving petitions, statements by members. I recognize a member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
I rise today on Early Childhood Educator Appreciation Day to recognize the incredible work of educators and childcare providers across our great province. They nurture and stimulate our kids, they foster empathy, curiosity, and creativity. They help kids get a good start in life. They also allow parents to get a much-needed break and continue to devote themselves to work and careers outside the home. As a busy parent of 2 young kids, I wake up thankful for their educators each and every day, Mr. Speaker. And as part of my appreciation for this profession, I've been speaking to educators across the province, and they've been clear about what they need. Fair wages, good working conditions, action along with this government's words, more spaces. We're a childcare desert, the worst in the nation, and the need has only become more intense with the $10 a day announcement. We recently learned the concerning fact that this government has only created 17% of targeted spaces under the federal agreement. More help. The increased workload with reporting, juggling all the many demands, has been tough. Inclusion funding, qualified folks to work with kids with higher needs, and many more spaces for those with needs which are getting more intense, more complex, and more challenging. These changes will show this government's true commitment to the sector. It will allow the focus to remain on laying a foundation for the future success and well-being of kids, and we will all benefit. Please join me in thanking these amazing educators.
Hear, hear. Recognize a member from Athabasca.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Tuesday, May 2nd, the Meadow Lake Tribal Council Industrial Investment was awarded the 2023 Aboriginal Economic Development Corporation Award by the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business. Hear, hear. The MLTC Industrial Investment was created in 2012 by a group of 9 First Nations. This member nation shares a combined population of 15,000 Indigenous people. Since then, they've made a significant positive impact on First Nation engagement and economic development in 5 sectors: forestry, renewable energy, oil and gas, agriculture, and hospitality services. Mr. Speaker, more than 1,800 direct and indirect jobs have been created as a result of the business relationships that MLTC has created in Northwest Saskatchewan. Each First Nations chief and their respective council determine priorities for their communities, with investment made into business development, as well as support of community-based initiatives such as housing, arenas, elders, or youth programs. Mr. Speaker, I ask that all members join me in congratulating the MLTC Industrial Investment on this remarkable achievement and award. I expect many more awards and recognition of their work in the future as they create more opportunities for Indigenous investment and Northwest business to flourish. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear, hear. Recognize the member for Saskatoon-Meewasin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of Representative Zoe Zephyr, a state representative from our neighbour to the south, Montana. Zoe, a proud trans woman, bravely spoke out against a discriminatory bill aimed at barring transgender minors from accessing gender-affirming care. Since then, although there has been no official censure, the Conservative House Leader has blocked her from speaking on the floor and cancelled all committees she was meant to attend. She's still showing up, working from a bench in the legislature hallways. This censuring of Zoe Zephyr for defending the rights and dignity of trans people has been dubiously legal and blatantly undemocratic. It's also a disturbing reminder that across the world, even in our own backyard, people in the 2S LGBTQIA community have been threatened, demeaned, and harassed. The Sask Party government has failed to defend members of this community a number of times, most recently by refusing to ban conversion therapy in the province. But we can all agree that behavior like this that we've seen in Montana will not stand in this province. And if that ever changes, you'll find me outside finishing the rest of this session in the hall. I ask all members to join me in supporting Representative Zephyr and join me in condemning her undemocratic silencing and the inexcusable attacks on the LGBTQ minors. Representative Zephyr, from Regina to Helena, we are with you.
Recognize the member from Indian Head, Milestone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on April 28th to 30th, the volunteer fire departments of Pilot Butte and Emerald Park were hosts to the 2023 Spring Saskatchewan Volunteer Firefighters Association School. Approximately 300 volunteer fire department personnel from all over the province participated in the weekend. Fire services are integral to Saskatchewan's public safety continuum, keeping people, families, and communities safe. They respond to much more than fire calls and are often first on the scene of motor vehicle collisions, rescue services, hazardous material containment and cleanup, and some medical calls as well, Mr. Speaker. Saskatchewan Volunteer Firefighters Association ensure that the brave volunteers in our province receive proper fire education, which is vital to ensuring the safety of those in their communities. This association provides volunteers with hands-on experience, allows them to practice and refine their skills. The volunteers received several classes throughout the weekend, from firefighting basics to courses on structures, search and rescue, vehicle extraction, livestock rescue, emergency scene traffic management, and many others. The association also helps the volunteers engage in teamwork and effective communications, which is critical in an emergency. Thank you to the Pilot Butte and Emerald Park Fire Departments for hosting this great weekend, and especially thank you to all those volunteer firefighters. We appreciate everything you do.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon-Riversdale.
It's another great day in Riversdale, Mr. Speaker. I want to tell you a brief story of two people with a dream in the heart of Riversdale, started in 2015. They operate the first and only HIV hospice and transitional care home, improving lives of people living with HIV. I'm referring to Sanctum Care Group. Only 4 years later, they expanded with Sanctum 1.5, Canada's first HIV and high-risk pre- and postnatal care home. This home serves women who are injecting drugs and pregnant. The goals are to improve health and social outcomes through improved access to prenatal care and prevent children from being apprehended at birth by providing a wraparound model of care. In this time, Mr. Speaker, over 123 mothers and their infants have been able to stay together. Only 2 infants have gone into foster care system. Over 80% of the mothers are able to graduate from the program sober with their children. Others are placed with family. These mothers that have graduated have regained custody of over 65 children. That's over 188 children out of foster care. On May 25th and 26th, I will be living on the street for 36 hours, raising money and awareness for Sanctum, and really doing what I like to do, spend time with the homeless and the less fortunate. I ask all members to join me in thanking Sanctum.
Recognize the member from Last Round, Touchwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For over 12 years, the community of Lipton has been home to the infamous Mud Bog event. Now, Mr. Speaker, I know what you may be thinking. What events transpire at mud bogs? Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you enter the event with your souped-up truck, racing down this track with cheering spectators covered in mud from head to toe. I know what you're thinking, Mr. Speaker. This is right up your alley. Since the inception of mud bogs, Lipton has been a hotspot for all things mud and loud trucks. Waylon Schuler, a seasoned participant from Regina, pitched an idea for Lipton Mud Bog organizers to sell raffle tickets to fans while raising money for various community organizations. The prize to be won would allow 12 lucky individuals to ride through the mud pits. Mr. Speaker, a total of $1,600 was donated to Hope's Home. Due to the raffle's success last August, organizers plan to continue this raffle and donate funds to various organizations. I ask that all members join me in thanking the Lipton Mud Bog crew for giving back to organizations across the province. I encourage all members and guests to drive out June 3rd to Lipton, cheer on the drivers, raising money for various charities across the province. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Kindersley.
Mr. Speaker, it's another beautiful and record-breaking day here in Saskatchewan. Today we announced that 2022 provincial exports to the United States have hit a record all-time high of $29.3 billion. Mr. Speaker, our top 3 exports to the United States last year included crude oil, potash, and canola oil. The United States is our largest export market here in Saskatchewan, and since 2018, exports have increased by a whopping 74%. The Premier recently returned from Washington, D.C., where he shared Saskatchewan's story to further increase trade in natural resources, including uranium, and critical minerals necessary to support high global demand. On this side of the House, we are committed to supporting our growing economy, focusing on international markets to increase trade and investment opportunities, creates more jobs and opportunities here at home. And you know, Mr. Speaker, while the NDP continue to talk down our economic growth, on this side of the House, we are proud of the successes that we are seeing. Mr. Speaker, you might also know we never experienced this type of growth under the NDP. In fact, the last time they were in office, they drove people, jobs, and investment out of this province. But under this government, we are seeing record exports, record population, and endless opportunities. And Mr. Speaker, that is something to be very proud of, and most certainly growth that works for everyone.
Question period. I recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this tired and out-of-touch government failed to deliver any relief at all for families struggling with the cost of living. Yesterday, the Finance Minister acknowledged that the average families in this province were left out of their budget. She mused that it was her own personal opinion that a cut to the PST that is something that should have been brought forward. Mr. Speaker, we haven't even finished voting off the estimates, and the Finance Minister is already admitting that families in this province need some relief. Mr. Speaker, we agree. Curious. What does the Premier think about the fact that his Finance Minister doesn't think that there was any relief at all for the cost of living crisis for families in his budget?
Recognize the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the Finance Minister, I'm happy to inform the Leader of the Opposition and all in this House that I think a great deal of her. Mr. Speaker, to the level that we've appointed her the Deputy Premier of the province of Saskatchewan. She introduced a budget just this last month, again, $2 billion in affordability measures. I went through one of them yesterday. I'll go in a little more detail, Mr. Speaker, and that's a family of 4. Compared to today to when the members opposite were government, Mr. Speaker, under the members opposite, that family of 4 paid about $5,000. Paid about $5,000, Mr. Speaker, in income tax. That family of 4, that same family of 4 with a household income of $75,000 today, paying just a little less than $2,000 a year, Mr. Speaker. How did that happen, you might ask? And, Mr. Speaker, how that happened is we raised the personal exemption, Mr. Speaker. We raised the spousal exemption. We raised the child tax exemption, and we lowered income tax rates in this province, Mr. Speaker. That most certainly, in addition to the $2 billion in each and every budget, Mr. Speaker, including this budget, that address affordability concerns for families and for Saskatchewan residents, Mr. Speaker, that most certainly is growth that continues to work for everyone.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it's obvious the Premier came prepped with some lines, and I can understand why. Right. Here's what the Finance Minister, Mr. Speaker, had to say in her own words, and I quote, "Into the future, and this is speculative, and my own opinion, so we don't have a position as a government, I would like to lower the PST." Of course, Mr. Speaker, this budget does none of that. This budget keeps all of the PST increases, plus all of the ones from 2017, Mr. Speaker, the highest tax increase in the history of this province. So I'm curious, what is the Premier's own personal opinion about the fact that his Finance Minister thinks that they should have lowered the PST?
Recognize the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'd love to lower the PST, and we did from 9%, Mr. Speaker, under the members. Mr. Speaker, as we know in this House and across the province, there was $500 tax affordability checks that were dispersed last fall to families across Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker, far in excess of the $105, I believe, or $104 that were offered by the members opposite, Mr. Speaker. We've lowered personal income tax. We've introduced the active family benefits, Mr. Speaker, an affordability measure for families with young children in the province, Mr. Speaker. First-time homebuyers are receiving a tax credit here in Saskatchewan. And in addition to that, Mr. Speaker, $10 a day childcare, and we are going to retain, unlike the members opposite, one of the largest tax incentives for young career people that are choosing to live in Saskatchewan, often families with children, and that's the graduate retention program that 81,000 Saskatchewan residents benefit from day in, day out.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, despite the spin, we saw a pretty stunning break in cabinet solidarity over there yesterday. The Finance Minister admitting, Mr. Speaker, that there was no relief for regular families in their budget, Mr. Speaker. And she admitted that she thinks that there need to be cuts to PST to help families who are struggling. But none of that, of course, Mr. Speaker, is actually in this budget. So what is the policy of that Premier? Should families keep paying more PST like we see in this budget, or does he agree with the Finance Minister and that there should be some cost of living relief? Which is it?
Recognize the Premier.
I went through a number of the tax incentives that we have, most notably for our families in the province of Saskatchewan. There's many more, and I would hope that over the course of this afternoon we're going to have the opportunity to put those all on the record, Mr. Speaker, and contrast those with some of the policies that we hear coming from the members opposite. But I want to just mention one of those, Mr. Speaker, and that's the active families benefit, introduced by this government, Mr. Speaker, delivered again in this budget this particular year, Mr. Speaker. An active families benefit that actually is being emulated by the NDP party in Alberta that's running for election there, Mr. Speaker. If it's good enough for the NDP party in Alberta, Mr. Speaker, we would hope that it's good enough for Saskatchewan residents.
Recognize the member from Regina Rosemont.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday we had a pretty unprecedented break in cabinet solidarity by that finance minister and that deputy premier. You know, and their guffaws are their tell, Mr. Speaker. They know what a breach it was. To defend her government's awful record on increasing the cost of living, delivering no relief, and bringing about the biggest tax hike in Saskatchewan history, she now floated that she thinks that PST relief is needed. You know, Mr. Speaker, this is a Bush League move. This is the finance minister who has a budget before us that should be offering that relief. What does the finance minister say to her colleagues who have been defending that tired and out-of-touch budget that we know that she doesn't even agree with?
Hear, hear, hear. I recognize Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to share those conversations because on this side of the House we're all unified on the same opinion. We are going to keep growth. We believe in growth. We believe in investment into our province and attracting that investment. And if you look at our past years, do you know what? As we grow, we have lowered taxes, lowered taxes, lowered taxes. So let's put that conversation in context, Mr. Speaker. You bet. We are going to continue to stand up for Saskatchewan. We're going to continue to try to attract more investment. And as the economy grows, we're going to continue to lower taxes.
Recognize the member from Regina Rosemount.
Mr. Speaker, it's laughable. For weeks, members of that cabinet and government have been carrying water for that minister and that budget that doesn't offer a dime of relief, Mr. Speaker. A budget that keeps the PST on construction labor and on the foods families buy in the grocery store, Mr. Speaker. But now the finance minister shares that she doesn't believe in her budget and that it's time to roll back the damaging tax that they've imposed on Saskatchewan people, the biggest tax hike in Saskatchewan's history. So when will the finance minister actually deliver some relief? Relief that should be part of this budget before it's voted off, or will it be yet another partisan vote-buying announcement on the eve of an election?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Finance. Hear, hear.
Let me help the member opposite out just a little bit, Mr. Speaker, on our record and what we are very unified on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker. You know what the general rate for the corporate income tax was when they were government in 2007? It was 14%, Mr. Speaker. It was 14%. What is it today? 12. We lowered that tax, Mr. Speaker. Small business that he pretends that he cares about. What was the small business tax? When they were in government in 2007, it was 4.5%. What is it today in this budget? It's 1%. It's 1%, Mr. Speaker. That's the record of our government. And what was the threshold for those small business? Well, it was 400,000. What is it today? 600,000, Mr. Speaker. Personal income taxes, we put on record again and again and again how much we've lowered it. That is the record of this government. Is any time that we can stimulate the economy, we need that economy and that growth to work for everyone, and that lowers the taxes.
Recognized member from Regina Rosemount.
You bet they're unified, Mr. Speaker. Unified in scandal and waste and sticking Saskatchewan with the bill, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, in rejecting our calls to take the PST off of food that families buy at the grocery store like muffins and salads and rotisserie chickens, the finance minister said her hands were tied because that's the system that the feds use on the GST, Mr. Speaker. That's nonsense, Mr. Speaker, especially when you consider the reasons that the minister gives for plowing ahead with the costly, redundant, virtue-signaling exercise that is the Saskatchewan Revenue Agency. On the one hand, they say they have to be in lockstep with Ottawa on taxes. On the other, we apparently need to chart boldly our own way. How does this make any sense?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Trade, Export and Development.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Finance has responded to that particular question, which that member has asked 100 times, 100 times. Let's talk about unity, Mr. Speaker. This is a crew opposite with 12 members who have literally 12 positions on every single issue. Just pick one that day, Mr. Speaker, and pick that member. Let's talk about the NRTA, for example. We have the member for Saskatoon Centre who says that that power should be taken away. It was illegal. She's supporting a lawsuit that wants to give the authority over natural resources to the Trudeau government. These members say, oh, no, that's not our position, Mr. Speaker. Who knows what their position actually is, but I think it's probably the member for Saskatoon Centre. On pipelines, the member for Rosemont stands up and votes against Keystone XL, and then he stands up every second day and says, oh, I love pipelines, Mr. Speaker. Which one is it? I think we know which one it is, Mr. Speaker. On the carbon tax, what is their position? We know because Ryan Miley said he supports a carbon tax, which they ran on, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, we don't support that. They have a different...
Recognize the member from Regina-Rosemont.
You know, that minister just says whatever he wants in here, Mr. Speaker. You know, the facts don't matter, Mr. Speaker. People know where they stand. And no answer on the Saskatchewan Revenue Agency that will cause people, taxpayers, and businesses to pay more than $260 million more over the next decade, forcing businesses to file twice, all in an effort to pander to their separatist base. But when it comes to taking the PST off food that people buy in grocery stores during a cost of living crisis, well, that's just a bridge too far. Mr. Speaker, does the minister actually believe that this widely panned and wasteful revenue agency in this wasteful revenue agency project, or is this just another policy where her personal opinion differs from that of her government?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Trade and Export Development.
Well, that was quite an assertion, Mr. Speaker, from the member opposite. This government has 60% plus support of the province of Saskatchewan. He just called that base separatist, Mr. Speaker. That's quite an accusation to make against 60% of the public that support this government. But let's continue with the unity theme here, Mr. Speaker, and the members opposite. This is a crew that has literally 12 positions on every single issue. What about the grad retention program? This is just literally from this week, Mr. Speaker. We have the member for Saskatoon University said it is a waste of money, we need to get rid of it. Then they stand up and say, oh, great program, Mr. Speaker. Which one do you believe? They actually voted against it, Mr. Speaker. With regard to allowing alcohol consumption in parks, on the one hand, they stand up, actually they didn't vote for the bill, but they said that they supported it. And then we have the member for Nutana, and there's a whole bunch of ground on this one to go, Mr. Speaker, that said that she actually doesn't support that, Mr. Speaker. Then we have the firearms bill. Make a great show of being supportive of the Saskatchewan Firearms Act. Then what happens? Well, the member for Nutana says we actually don't support that, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Regina-Rosemont.
No answer, all deflection. As for unity, you know, they're unified with mismanagement, they're unified on the taxes, Mr. Speaker. Not so unified, though, when it comes to nominations these days, Mr. Speaker, though. You know, the minister can't have it both ways when it comes to taxes and the federal government. She can't claim that it's Ottawa's fault that Sask Party government is applying the PST to regular foods that parents and seniors buy every day in the grocery store, while at the same time, they keep pouring millions into our costly tax collection virtue signaling project, all as some misguided policy to pander to, you know, a separatist base, Mr. Speaker. How does that minister square this circle? Why won't she do the right thing and scrap this plan before another dime or millions are wasted?
Recognize the Minister of Trade and Export Development.
There they go again, Mr. Speaker. 60% of the public of the province are separatists, apparently, to the NDP. I guess if you don't support the NDP, Mr. Speaker, you are a separatist, according to that member opposite. But we know who they are unified with, Mr. Speaker, because they have made it very, very clear. They are unified with their two leaders, Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau. They are unified on the policy agenda of Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh. And what is that policy agenda, Mr. Speaker? It is anti-energy, it is anti-pipeline, it is pro-carbon tax, it is anti-development, all things that they have a long record of being in favor of.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
That's simply not the case, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in doctors' offices across the province, posters are popping up. They're from the Saskatchewan College of Family Physicians, and they're targeted at people who don't have a family doctor. The poster asks patients who can't get a family doctor to write to their MLAs to call for a solution. Wow. The minister has constantly downplayed the problems in healthcare. He thinks everything is fine. Does the fact that doctors are organizing a letter-writing campaign not bother the minister? What else do they need to do before he'll admit there are problems when it comes to family medicine?
Hear, hear.
Recognize Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And this government does take it very serious. That's why Minister of Rural and Remote, myself, and all members on this House meet with healthcare providers almost on a daily basis to be able to talk about what's going on in their community and where we can make some improvement. Mr. Speaker, just last week, I didn't hear any comments from the opposition on this other than their one statement, Mr. Speaker, on the blended capitation model that is being brought forward by the Saskatchewan Medical Association specifically to retain Mr. Speaker, specifically to retain and recruit physicians from across the province, Mr. Speaker, and also this year, I want to be able to say that this is the first time that the College of Medicine was able to fill up all of their family medicine. This is the first time in history we've been able to do this, Mr. Speaker, better than any other medicine school across the country, Mr. Speaker. We're going to continue to invest within our physicians and all of our healthcare team. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. Recognize a member from Saskatoon, Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, changing compensation is a positive step forward, but it's only one step, and we need physician-led team-based care across this province. The poster reads, quote, "This crisis will worsen as more family physicians retire and fewer medical school graduates enter this profession unless we act now." They're not saying there will be a crisis, Mr. Speaker. They're saying we're already in a crisis. Doctors are saying it and patients are saying it, but the minister is not saying it. Who does the minister think we should believe about the state of our healthcare system? Family doctors or him?
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This coming from a group that cut the positions, and Mr. Speaker, they cut psychiatric nurse positions in our province, Mr. Speaker. We've added from 60 positions in our medicine up to 128, over doubling it, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
And the members ask, who do I listen to, Mr. Speaker? How about Dr. John Jeffrey, the outgoing SMA president? This is positive news, and we are very pleased to hear that the Minister of Health and the government are willing to be partners with us and improve our care for patients, not back-patting. This is the doctors, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, these are the doctors, and if they don't want to believe them, then that's fine, Mr. Speaker. This is exactly what the physicians are telling me. It's in the news, it's in the media, Mr. Speaker, to be able to talk about the great investment that this government is continuing to do in our primary care, our surgical backlog, to make sure that the patients of Saskatchewan get the service that they need. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon, Fairview.
The SMA has also said that we still need team-based care, Mr. Speaker. They've been very clear about this, and that this is a step in that direction, but this is not team-based care, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's always the same from this tired and out-of-touch government. People in healthcare flag a serious, urgent issue. The government ignores it. The issue gets worse and explodes into a full-blown crisis. The government finally takes notice at the last minute and announces a plan to make a plan. We've seen it with the lack of pediatric GI specialists. We're seeing it with family physicians. When is this minister going to start doing his job and deal with the crises before they get to the point of no return?
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just a news update that we announced this back in September, Mr. Speaker, with a very public event on our 4-point human resource plan to be able to secure individuals, recruit, retain, incentivize, and train individuals across this province, Mr. Speaker. We've been talking about this all the time, Mr. Speaker. We do have great successes in this, Mr. Speaker. We have added 550 seats across 18 designations, Mr. Speaker, on top of the 150 nursing seats. It brings us to 900 244 nursing seats in our province. Again, as I identified in my previous question, going from 60 back in 2007 when they had the privilege of forming government up to 128, Mr. Speaker. We have a great working relationship with the Saskatchewan Medical Association, with the College of Medicine, to be able to make sure, and also, Mr. Speaker, introducing physician assistants, Mr. Speaker, which is absolutely brand new to this province. It's going to help secure our healthcare system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. Recognize a member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Mr. Speaker, this tired and out-of-touch government is totally failing to deliver in our kids' classrooms around this province. Saskatoon Public and Regina Public have already told parents and teachers that cuts will be needed to balance the budget. Now Prairie Valley School Division is the latest, with an email sent to parents last week because their division is actually getting a black and white cut to its operating dollars. While its enrollment is increasing by over 100 students, they wrote families saying, quote, PVSD's operating funding for 2023-24 is $103.9 million, a reduction of $261,000 compared to last year. With enrollment projected to increase by 105 students, per student funding will decrease. Mr. Speaker, again, as more students with fewer dollars, how does this make any sense to that out-of-touch government?
Recognize the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've had an opportunity to meet with the senior administration and the board members, not all of them, but last week of Regina Public School Division. I have a meeting with the senior leadership of Saskatoon Public School Division later this week. I have meetings with both Regina and Saskatoon Catholic School Divisions next week. What I've indicated to them, even on Budget Day, Mr. Speaker, is that we based our budget based on their projections that they gave us in January, and we at that time indicated that we thought their projections were low compared to what enrollment is expected to be in September, but we used their numbers like we did last year, Mr. Speaker, and what we did last year was provide a mid-year adjustment and an additional $20 million in enrollment growth, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will be having conversations with those school divisions to look at not only enrollment growth that we're expecting, Mr. Speaker, and working with them through that, but as well, Mr. Speaker, we're also expecting recommendations from the Class Size and Composition Committee, Mr. Speaker, by hopefully by the end of this month, and we'll be looking to address those as well.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Mr. Speaker, this minister keeps talking about doing the same as what they did last year. What they did last year is why thousands of people came here to protest outside the steps of this legislature. And they came from all over Saskatchewan, including rural areas like Prairie Valley. Now, the Premier and the Minister can claim that these folks have been heard and that they'll look at funding for in-year enrollments in the cities. But that's not the issue in these rural school divisions. Their problem isn't an influx of thousands of new students. Their problem is that there simply is not enough funding for education, and they will see a reduction in per-student funding this year, again, below 2015 levels. What is that minister going to do to respond to the needs in rural school divisions?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in his previous question, he referenced that enrollment is going up in Prairie Valley, and now he says that it's not enrollment that's driving issues, Mr. Speaker. What I've indicated to the school divisions is that we knew last year that enrollment projections provided to the ministry by the school divisions in January that we budgeted on in March, Mr. Speaker, by the September reconciliation date at the end of September, that those numbers were no longer accurate, Mr. Speaker, and so we did provide that dollars in November. Mr. Speaker, we have heard from school divisions that would like to know certainly prior to November, what we will do in terms of an enrollment adjustment. That's what we are doing, Mr. Speaker. We are working with those school divisions to look at what their projections were, to see what may actually be the case when enrollment does show up in schools in September. Mr. Speaker, we'll be working with them over the next number of weeks to try to get a better sense of what their numbers actually will be in September, Mr. Speaker, and then we will be making decisions based on that.
Good job. Recognize the member from Saskatoon-Meewasin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Every life lost to drug overdose is a tragedy. In the last 4 months, Saskatchewan has had 186 tragedies, 186 families who have lost a loved one, 186 times paramedics, doctors and nurses couldn't save a person's life. There are few families who've been left untouched by these tragedies. These numbers are too high, and action is needed to save lives. The minister touts recovery programs, but you have to be alive to get treatment. When will the minister fund safe consumption sites like Prairie Harm Reduction in Saskatoon to ensure that people survive the tainted drug crisis and ensure fewer families have to bury loved ones?
Recognize the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We extend our condolences to each and every family across this province that's lost a loved one to overdose, Mr. Speaker. In this year's budget, $80 million specifically towards addictions services and supports. Of that, $12.4 million targeted specifically to accessing treatment and detox as well. Additional dollars for harm reduction and prevention, Mr. Speaker. More funding for more treatment spaces in this province. The launch of overdose outreach teams, Mr. Speaker. The launch of mass spectrometers in Regina and Saskatoon as part of our harm reduction efforts, Mr. Speaker. Funding for housing supports at the Phoenix Society here in Regina for the SHA's opioid stewardship program, Mr. Speaker. Partnerships with the Saskatoon Tribal Council and other organizations across this province to provide mobile services, Mr. Speaker, and more to come in the months ahead.
Ministerial statements, introduction of bills, presenting reports by standing and special committees. I recognize the Chair of the Standing Committee on Intergovernmental Affairs and Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am instructed by the Standing Committee on Intergovernmental Affairs and Justice to report that it has considered the certain estimates and to present the fifth report, which includes the 2023-24 estimates and the 22-23 supplementary estimates number 2. I move that the fifth report on the Standing Committee on Intergovernmental Affairs and Justice now be concurred in.
It has been moved by the Chair that the fifth report of the Standing Committee on Intergovernmental Affairs and Justice be now concurred in. Is the Assembly ready for the question? It's a pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion. Carried. I recognize the Chair of the Standing Committee on Intergovernmental Affairs and Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am instructed by the Standing Committee on Intergovernmental Affairs and Justice to report Bill number 125, the Cannabis Control Saskatchewan Amendment Act 2022 without amendment.
When shall this bill be considered in Committee of the Whole on Bills? I recognize the Minister responsible for Saskatchewan Liquor Gaming Authority.
I request leave to waive consideration in the Committee of the Whole on the bill and that this bill now be read a third time.
The Minister has requested leave to waive consideration in Committee of the Whole on Bill number 125, the Cannabis Control Saskatchewan Amendment Act 2022, and that the bill be now read the third time. Is leave granted? Minister may proceed to move third reading.
I move that this bill now be read a third time and pass under its title.
It has been moved by the Minister that the bill be now read the third time and passed under its title. Assembly ready for the question? Pledge the Assembly to adopt the motion. Carried.
Third reading of this bill.
Third reading. I recognize the Chair of the Standing Committee on Intergovernmental Affairs and Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am instructed by the Standing Committee on Intergovernmental Affairs and Justice to report Bill number 132, the Boiler and Pressure Vessel Automation and Remote Supervision Pilot Amendment Act 2023 without amendment.
It's a big one.
When shall this bill be considered in Committee of the Whole on Bills? I recognize the Minister of Government Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request leave to waive consideration in Committee of the Whole on this bill and that this bill be now read a third time.
The Minister has requested leave to waive consideration in Committee of the Whole on Bill number 132, the Boiler and Pressure Vessel Automation and Remote Supervision Pilot Amendment Act 2023, and that the bill be now read the third time. Is leave granted? Minister may proceed to move third reading.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that this bill be now read a third time and passed under its title.
It has been moved by the Minister that the bill be now read the third time and passed under its title. Assembly ready for the question? Pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion. Carried.
Third reading of this bill.
Third reading. I recognize the Chair of the Standing Committee on Human Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm instructed by the Standing Committee on Human Services to report that it has considered certain estimates and to present its fifth report, which includes the 2023-24 estimates and the 2022-23 supplementary estimates number 2. I move that the fifth report of the Standing Committee on Human Services be now concurred in.
It has been moved by the Chair that the fifth report of the Standing Committee on Human Services be now concurred in. Is the Assembly ready for the question? Pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion. Carried. I recognize the Chair of the Standing Committee on Human Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm instructed by the Standing Committee on Human Services to report Bill number 91, the Saskatchewan Employment Part 3 Amendment Act 2022 without amendment.
When shall this bill be considered in Committee of the Whole on Bills? I recognize the Minister of Labour Relations and Workplace Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request leave to waive consideration in Committee of the Whole on this bill, and the bill be now read the third time.
It doesn't count.
The Minister has requested leave to waive consideration in Committee of the Whole on Bill number 91, the Saskatchewan Employment Part 3 Amendment Act 2022, that the bill be now read the third time. Is leave granted? The Minister may proceed to move third reading.
I move the bill be now read the third time and passed under its title.
It has been moved by the Minister that the bill be now read the third time, passed under its title. Is the Assembly ready for the question? The pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion. Carried.
Third reading of this bill.
Third reading. I recognize the Chair of the Standing Committee on Human Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm instructed by the Standing Committee on Human Services to report Bill number 134, the Education Amendment Act 2023 without amendment.
When shall this bill be considered in Committee of the Whole? I recognize the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to waive consideration in Committee of the Whole on this bill, and the bill be now read the third time.
The Minister has requested leave to waive consideration in Committee of the Whole on Bill number 134, the Education Amendment Act 2023, and that the bill be now read the third time. Is leave granted? The Minister may proceed to move third reading.
I move that the bill be now read the third time and passed under its title.
It has been moved by the Minister that the bill be now read the third time, passed under its title. Assembly ready for the question? Is it a pleasure of Assembly to adopt the motion? On division?
This bill.
Third reading. I recognize the Chair of the Standing Committee on Human Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm instructed by the Standing Committee on Human Services to report Bill number 135, the Education Consequential Amendments Act 2023 without amendment.
When shall this bill be considered in Committee of the Whole on Bills? I recognize the Minister of Education.
I request leave to waive consideration in Committee of the Whole on this bill, and that the bill be now read the third time.
The minister has requested leave to waive consideration in Committee of the Whole on Bill number 135, the Education Consequential Amendments Act 2023, that the bill be now read the third time. Is leave granted? Minister may proceed to move third reading.
I move that the bill be now read the third time and passed under its title.
It has been moved by the minister that the bill be now read the third time and passed under its title. Assembly ready for the question? Is it the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion? On division.
Third reading of this bill.
Third reading. Government orders. I do now leave the chair for Committee of Finance.